It was a morning like any other when Helen, stopped at the traffic light, saw a young mother with her baby in her arms. That image, which would change her life forever, struck her like a bolt of lightning. But what happened next? Before continuing, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other incredible stories like this. Enjoy! Helen was a woman who for years had lived a life completely detached from people. Every day she woke up at the same time, walked the same streets, and faced the same work commitments with an almost maniacal precision. Her job as an accountant kept her busy for hours, locked in her small office full of papers, numbers, and calculations. She had never been a person who sought the company of others. On the contrary, she preferred solitude and a life free of emotional complications. He did not attend social events, nor did he make friends with his neighbors. His house perfectly reflected this coldness. Little furniture, no paintings, no objects that could reveal a glimmer of his personality. It was an orderly life, but devoid of color, devoid of human connections. Yet despite this apparent stability, something in Helen seemed to be about to change. Perhaps it was her own loneliness that, day after day, had begun to weigh like a millstone. Or maybe it was that sense of emptiness that, despite all the success in his career, was starting to creep into his heart. His life, which he had once considered perfectly controlled, was starting to seem meaningless. One morning, on her way to an important business meeting, Helen found herself stuck in traffic. She was late, a fact that caused her great anxiety. The light seemed to never turn green, and she couldn't take her eyes off the clock. But then suddenly, her eyes fell on something completely different from her usual orderly world. On the sidewalk, right in front of her, was a young mother, Emma, with a baby in her arms. The little boy looked dirty and hungry, while his mother's eyes were filled with silent tears. The sight hit her like a punch in the stomach. Helen felt something inside her change, an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Compassion. For the first time in years, she wasn't just thinking about her work, her success. Instead, that scene continued to haunt her. Even when the light finally turned green and Helen headed back to the meeting, her mind couldn't tear itself away from that mother and her baby. The meeting went as planned, but everything seemed distant, irrelevant. Helen was there physically, but her heart remained on that sidewalk, next to that unknown woman. At the end of the day, instead of going home, Helen found herself back in the same place where she had seen Emma. This time, however, she had not come empty-handed. She had bought food, diapers, and clothes for the baby. When she handed them to the young mother, the two women began to talk. Emma told Helen a story that would change her forever. She had lost her job, been evicted, and was struggling to survive on the streets of the city. Helen, who until recently had lived only for her work, suddenly found herself involved in something much bigger. Over the next few months, Helen changed completely. She was no longer the apathetic, cold woman she had been for years. She now spent much of her free time helping the homeless. She collected food, clothing, and essential supplies for them, working with various relief centers. She even committed to offering training courses to help the homeless learn new skills and find jobs. What had started as a small act of compassion had turned into a mission. Helen felt, for the first time in years, that she had a purpose in life. But his new life didn't go unnoticed. Some of his neighbors didn't approve of what he was doing. They thought that handing out food to the homeless would attract even more homeless people to the area. Local authorities began receiving complaints, and soon the police got involved. If the story is moving you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support. Fearing that Helen was encouraging the homeless to stay there, ignoring the eviction order, they arrested her without even giving her time to explain herself. Her generosity, which for her was just a way of doing good, had been dramatically misunderstood. Helen was handcuffed and taken to the police station under the incredulous gaze of the people she had helped for months. Shocked and confused, she found herself sitting in a small room in the police station. She couldn't believe that helping people in need could lead her to this. The police seemed determined to treat her like a criminal, convinced that she was obstructing public order. But just when all seemed lost, a familiar face entered the room. James, the police chief, and Helen's old friend. James knew Helen well. He knew what a compassionate and dedicated woman she had become. After hearing her side of the story, he immediately intervened to clarify the situation. He explained to his colleagues that Helen was not trying to break the law, but was following the eviction order, looking for a safe place for the homeless. The police officers, realizing the misunderstanding, immediately released Helen, who could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But the real surprise came shortly after. As she was leaving the police station, the family Helen had helped showed up to defend her. Emma, with her baby in her arms, spoke with determination. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was helping us. Her words, full of gratitude and honesty, moved everyone present. The officers, touched by the gesture of the homeless community, apologized to Helen, recognizing her commitment to the good of others. From that day on, Helen was no longer seen as a cold and distant accountant, but as a woman who had decided to change the world, a person in search of justice and compassion. She had found a new path, a new reason to live, and she had no intention of stopping.